Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, President van der Bellen, for your wonderful speech and for your partnership and for your passion for the environment. And thank you very much to Monica for organizing all of this with the whole team. Let's give again a big hand to Monica Langtauer. I also want to say thank you to Matt Eisman for doing such an extraordinary job of being the host here today. I love the guy. Thank you so much. Big hand to Matt. Then thank you for traveling all the way over from Washington, John Podesto, the climate czar for President Biden. Let's give him a big, big hand. Then Maroš Šefčovič, the Vice President of the EU. Thank you very much. We've been friends for a long, long time. You even came and smoked at my house some cigars. I don't know if anyone is allowed to know that you smoke a cigar. I mean, God forbid. But in any case, we had a great time there, and so it's always great to see you. Big hand also to Maroš. And then to the Ambassador, Vicky Kennedy. Where's Vicky? Oh, right over there, Vicky. You look fantastic today. Look at that. Big hand to the Ambassador of the United States, Vicky Kennedy. I also want to say thank you to the speakers and to the sponsors here today. Without them, it wouldn't be possible to have this event. Anyway, thank you also all for gathering here today. It's always nice when you have a packed house. And when Monica calls me a few days before and says, oh my God, we have a big problem. I say, what's the problem? She says, I had to turn away 1,700 people. I said, well, that's not a problem. I said, that's great. I always loved it when they said they couldn't get into your movie theater, Arnold, there were too many people outside. That meant they sold a lot of tickets. It was nice. So anyway, it is great to have this packed room right here today. Now, we started, of course, the Austrian World Summit to create a stage where world leaders, business visionaries, and subnational governments and youth activists could come together and say whatever they need to say, not just what people want to hear. I've been to the environmental summits all over the world for the last 2 decades. Copenhagen, Rio de Janeiro, Paris, Bonn, Vienna, and the list goes on and on and on. Those conferences have a very important purpose. Countries need to come together and come to agreements and set big, big goals. No two ways about that. But after all of the agreements and the summits and the celebrations that we've seen over the years and decades, the pollution keeps going up. We keep using more and more fossil fuels. People keep dying. The first United Nations Conference on the Environment was in Brazil in 1992, 32 years ago. Over 200 million people have died from pollution since then. Think about that. 7 million people every single year. I believe the world needs to gather and to talk about this issue. It's very important. This is why conferences like this are so important. And I did the same thing when I was trying to get the world to join my fitness crusade. The more meetings we had, the more summits we had, the more gatherings we had, the better it was. And we all of a sudden saw some great progress. Where people all over the world started exercising and taking food supplements and getting healthy and all that. But here, when we come together, I don't believe we have anything to celebrate. If the 200 million people worldwide who have died from pollution since the United Nations started environmental meetings were from one country, that country would have the 6th largest population in the world. The sixth largest population in the world. That's how many people have died. Here at the Austrian World Summit, we want to be honest. We want to say the things from our podium that they only whisper at other conferences backstage. We can't just keep going to conference to conference and blaming the oil companies for all of this, because that obviously isn't doing the job. All we care about is action. Everyone knows me, that's what I always say, action, action. Talk alone won't save us, but action will. And note that we all want the same future, we all share the same vision. No two ways about that. I can see it very clearly in front of me. I see a world with clean and blue sky. I see a world without pollution choking our children and killing those 7 million people every year. A world where no matter where you live, you can drink the water and breathe the air without a second thought, just the way I grew up here in Austria. I see a world where fossil fuels are actually a fossil, a relic of our past left to history. A world that chooses the future instead of the past. A world where solar, wind, water, batteries, and clean nuclear power have replaced coal, oil, and natural gas. I see a world that never fights another war over oil or is forced to tolerate a country's terrible actions because we depend on their resources. A world where countries live in harmony because every country has access to the sun, to the wind, to the water, and the elements that can power our lives. That is my vision. Now, I know we all share that vision. We all believe that climate change and pollution are an existential threat. We all want a world without oil and coal and pollution. So why don't we act like it, is the question. Why don't we make moves to get us there? I tell people in the gym that when it comes to motivation, there are two Arnolds. There's the inspiring pat on the back Arnold, and there's telling you the truth and what you need to hear, kick in the ass Arnold. You all deserve a pat in the back for decades of work to protect our environment. I'm proud of the work that you've done to move us towards a cleaner future. You've made us all aware of the importance of clean air and water, the plastic in the ocean, the destruction of our coral reefs, the need to recycle and not to just create more and more waste. And the list goes on and on. And I know that every single one of you means well. But today, I come to you as the kick in the ass Arnold. Because there are some harsh truths that everyone needs to hear. I have spent my whole life chasing big dreams, big visions, visions that everyone said were impossible. But vision is the first and most important step in anything we do. And that's what I talk about even in my book, Be Useful. Vision. You got to have a goal to know where you're going to go. I also mention in my book that after the vision comes the plan. And after the plan, the work starts. You have to do whatever it takes, whatever work it takes, to make that vision become a reality, even if it is uncomfortable. Especially if it's uncomfortable. Let's go back again to the gym. When you work out and you do your curls, the first few are easy. Then it gets harder. Then it gets harder and harder, and it starts burning, and then it starts aching. Then it starts getting really uncomfortable. And that's when the bicep really grows. Discomfort is where we grow. Being uncomfortable is the first sign that you're making progress. I believe that my environmental friends share our vision of a beautiful, innovative, clean world. But I do not believe that all of you are doing everything that it takes to make that vision a reality, even though your hearts are in the right place. In fact, in many cases, environmentalists have stood in the way of the work that needs to be done to achieve a clean energy future. Now, I understand we all make mistakes. At last year's summit, I told you the story of when we planned to build a new transmission line for renewable energy when I was the governor of the great state of California. I told you that story. The Sunrise Power Link, it was called. The Sunrise Power Link will bring clean solar power from the desert, from a big solar plant, to nearly 1 million homes. So you can have the best solar plant in the world, but if you don't have the power link, if you don't have a transmission line to get it into town, into the homes, into the businesses, you have nothing. It took 8 years for that vision to become a reality. But it only took 1.5 years to actually build. We wasted 6.5 years on red tape and lawsuits before we got to work. 6.5 years, environmentalists filed lawsuits and complaints to delay the project for as long as they could. It wasn't finished until the next governor, Governor Jerry Brown, was in office. He felt so bad for me that he had me give the keynote speech for that opening ceremony, even though he was from the other party. So think about that. That's how bad he felt. 6.5 years for a project that every environmentalist knew would decrease California's reliance on fossil fuels. So because of that, now we had to use more fossil fuels. So it was a great victory for the oil companies and the fossil fuel companies. We handed them a medal. You are the winner, because we get held up. 6.5 years for a project that every expert said would help large-scale solar farms boom and become more affordable for consumers. 6.5 years for what? Sadly, my story isn't unique. In a study of solar projects in America from 2010 to 2018, Stanford University found that 2/3 of them faced lawsuits, and less half of them are operational today. Think about that. Only half of them are operational today. We are talking about solar projects that were proposed 6 to 14 years ago. Today, more than half of them still aren't doing anything to get us off coal and oil. So again, another victory for the oil companies and for the fossil fuel companies. So we are handing them medals after medals, victories after victories. President Biden made a historic investment in clean energy. Historic. Literally I'm talking about $1 trillion. Little do the people know how hard it will be to make that investment from vision to reality. It is the same story everywhere. In Germany, they set an ambitious goal to cut pollution by 65% by the year 2030. By 65%. That's a huge goal. It's unbelievable. But 1/3 of their wind projects are being delayed by their permitting process. And on top of that, they closed the nuclear power plants that provide 6% of their clean energy. So you say to yourself, well, wait a minute. How are they going to replace this clean energy? Well, They really don't know, but they know one thing: they have to keep the coal burning. And they're investing 16 billion euros right now to build 4 huge natural gas plants. So I hope that you get the story here. So they said no to clean energy, the 6%, and they said yes to fossil fuels, the coal and the natural gas. How does that make sense when you have a goal to decrease your pollution by 65%? How can you tell your citizens that you are in an emergency that requires us to stop using fossil fuels as quickly as possible, but at the same time you make decisions that require more fossil fuels and that pollute the world even more? How does that make sense? Why should your citizens take your goals seriously if you, the leaders and the environmentalists, don't take them seriously? That's the question. Now, we in California, we take them seriously. We have a nuclear power plant called the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant. It was supposed to close in 2024. But no. President Biden said, wait a minute. Governor Newsom said, wait a minute. This is giving us clean energy. Let's keep it open. Let's refurbish it, modernize it, spend $1 billion to make sure that it's safe. Now they kept it open for years to come because it's providing clean energy for California, 9% of clean energy. So why would we shut it down? See, that's being sane. But all over the world, governments are setting ambitious goals to create a clean energy future. And all over the world, governments are allowing bureaucracy and red tape to stand in the way of progress and a clean energy future. So as you can see, it's not just the oil companies. Everyone is in on it that holds us back. The European Union, for instance, their goal is to have 45% of renewable energy in the next 6 years, by the year 2030. They're at 23% now. The permitting process in the EU can take as long as 9 years. 9 years. So do the math. The UK's goal is to have 100% of its electricity to be produced without carbon emission in 11 years from now, in 2035. However, some solar and wind projects in the UK are waiting 10 to 15 years to get approval. Do the math. The United States also has a goal for a decrease of pollution by 50% in 6 years, by the year 2030. You guessed it. Our average permit time for a transmission line for clean energy, may I underline, clean energy, is 6.5 years, with some taking as long as 11 years. So do the math. How are those governments, when they make promises, keep those promises when they know the delays are going to make it impossible to keep those promises? Here's what's even scarier, that the average permit time in the United States for a clean energy transmission line is more than a year longer than for a fossil fuel pipeline. You say, this couldn't be. This is not science fiction here that I'm talking about. I'm talking about reality. How can you tell people that this is an emergency when you allow this kind of insane delays? We know that governments have the power to cut through the red tape in emergencies. We know they do because I remember when I was governor, there was a connection to a bridge that collapsed after a fuel tanker crashed and burnt this giant on-ramp. For hours and hours, the flames were there and it was melting all the steel of that on-ramp. So it wiped it out. 280,000 drivers a day used that on-ramp. So you can imagine, I was in the office and I was scrambling. Oh my God, 280,000 used this on-ramp. We got to replace it as quickly as possible. Well, the experts said that it could take weeks to clean the debris, and months, if not a year, to rebuild it. So, I declared a state of emergency to blast through all of the red tape, and 26 days later, we shocked the world and we reopened that bridge. 26 days later. See, that's action. That's combing right through all the mess because you declare a state of emergency. And the climate crisis now is in a state of emergency, so a lot of people can call for a state of emergency. Imagine a real emergency now for a second, just so you understand. Imagine a real emergency where someone has just been hit by a car, and he's lying there, he's bleeding to death. Imagine stopping the paramedic from applying bandages to ask for a permit. Imagine telling the paramedic that we need to study what hospital we should send this patient to. And imagine saying that we need hours of studies to review before we can really use whatever method needs to be used to save this patient. Imagine that. You would say, this is fucking crazy. Stop the bleeding. This patient is dying. Save him. But there are people like this all over the world. They say this is an existential threat. The world is coming to an end. We are running out of time. We need clean energy, but you can't use safe nuclear power, and you can't get permits for wind and solar or hydro. This is what's going on. This is fucking crazy. Stop the bleeding. The earth is dying. We have to do whatever it takes to make our vision of a pollution-free world a reality. Whatever it takes, stop the bleeding. Doing whatever it takes requires, of course, compromise. It requires letting go of this perfect world that will never exist and choosing a possible world that we do have the power to build together. It requires making uncomfortable choices that will bring us closer to our vision. It requires letting go of this not in my backyard philosophy that people have used to block projects year after year. They say that they want solar. They say that they want to have wind. But the moment someone proposes a project in their community, they say, whoa, 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 whoa. Wait a second, let's do a little study first on this issue. They want to delay it. That's my very good friend, John Podesta, President Biden's leader on clean energy issues, who I'm so happy that he is here today with us, has said it best. If you can't build some new things in the backyards, in the few backyards, the climate crisis will destroy everyone's backyards. John, you couldn't have put it better. That's exactly what it is. We have to stop being selfish. Now, I want you to bring that vision from the beginning of my speech back to your mind and close your eyes. Envision the world without pollution. Imagine it without any death from exhaust of oil and smoke of coal. Picture your children and grandchildren playing in clean lakes and rivers and breathing fresh air. And now, open your eyes. What would you do to make that vision a reality? What would you do? I know my answer, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Stop the bleeding. Save our children. Save the planet. Save our future. I know you have the brains. I know you have the heart. And I know you have the power. So let's do it. Thank you very much. Thank you.